The social media ghost. I was at my desk when the email came in from cybercrimes. To Detective Kira Dennessy, Cold Case Unit. Please see the attached social media account. Reference Cold Case 7820, Cameron York. Cameron York had been missing for 12 years. She had been an influencer before they really were a thing. She had cultivated a following of dedicated fans who loved her style and fashion and lifestyle and became loyal Yorkers, the name for Cameron's mega fans. Her Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube had gone completely silent one day, out of the blue, and stayed that way until last night. Someone, possibly Cameron, had posted a photo to her Facebook account after more than a decade of inactivity. I found Cameron's file and began looking through it. A 23-year-old missing female, newly employed as a graphic designer. She was last seen by a colleague leaving the office. She never made it home, and her phone had been found the following day by officers who were searching for her. I read through investigators' notes, flipped through the evidence photos from areas the police had searched. A hair bobble, one pink flip-flop, a $5 bill. Detectives had photographed anything in the block or so surrounding where she was last seen in case it could be related. There wasn't much else to go on. There was no unusual bank activity before her disappearance, no CCTV camera footage, no passport usage, and absolutely no sign of her after she walked out of her office building. Adults are allowed to disappear, and with no signs of foul play and no leads, Cameron's case went cold quickly. Detectives told the family that Cameron most likely left of her own accord. But Cameron's mom, Diane, did not accept that and never gave up looking for her daughter. Diane had contacted cybercrimes when she saw the photo posted to Cameron's account. The case was now reignited, and I was more than curious. I clicked to view the Facebook post, which had no caption, just an image of a hair tie beside a chain-link fence lying on cracked pavement. I had just seen this same photo. I hastily flipped back through the file again, and there it was. A police photo taken during the original search of an industrial lot beside the river, a block away from her office building. One of the last places that investigators had looked before momentum died. This photo had never been released publicly. The photo had been taken by an officer, shown to the family. It was clear that it had never belonged to Cameron, and ever since then it had just been sitting in this file unseen. So how did it appear on Cameron's Facebook 12 years later? I called cybercrimes and learned that they had traced the login location to the Wi-Fi at a coffee shop from an Android phone, but that was all they could tell me. Whoever had posted it understood the basics of remaining anonymous. By noon, the image was everywhere. True crime accounts reposted it. Comment sections were exploding with theories. People who had never heard Cameron's name suddenly became experts on her disappearance. Videos started popping up, deep dives into Cameron's life and disappearance. Diane was interviewed on the local news station again, pleading this time for Cameron to get in touch, to reply to her mother's message to her on the account. I sat at my desk watching Diane with tears streaming down her face, hopeful that her daughter might finally come home. But I had a terrible sinking feeling inside my stomach. Whoever had posted the photo had access to the case file, and that person wasn't Cameron. A second photo appeared the next morning, a red scarf draped across a bench. Evidence photo 14. So this wasn't random posting. They were referencing the investigation itself, and they had access to photos they shouldn't have. I pulled the original reports. Detective Hardy had handled the case back then. He retired 5 years ago, and he had no loose ends except the missing woman. Cameron's sister, Tamia, still lived locally. I called her and asked if she could come in. She arrived holding a coffee that she never sipped. People who have lived with uncertainty long enough develop a certain quietness, like they're afraid to hope too loudly. "Do you think it's her posting?" she asked. "I don't think so," I told her honestly. "I think someone wants attention for your sister's case, but I couldn't tell you who or why." She looked disappointed, but not surprised. "She used to take pictures like that," Tamia said. "Random things that everyone else just ignored." I wrote it down, even though it didn't feel useful. Patterns matter. "Have you had any messages from Cameron's account?" I asked. "No. I've messaged her and so has Mom, but we haven't gotten a reply. They've been read, though." I nodded. Tamia was 37, but I guessed that it was the grief that had etched the fine lines in her face that aged her. "Can you find out who's using Cam's account?" she asked. "Well, I'm working with the cybercrimes unit and we are trying," I explained. "I am going to do my very best to find out who this is, and if it is Cameron, to bring her home." Tamia blinked back tears. "Thank you," she said. I offered her a tissue. Over the next week, the account posted 4 more photos: an earring on the pavement, a stairwell, a bus stop, a street corner captured at dawn. The earring and the stairwell were evidence photos, but the bus stop and the street corner, which was nearest to her office building, were locations that had featured heavily in the early investigation. Those 2 photos were originals. There were never any people in the photos, and still no messages were sent, no captions. Cybercrimes could only give me the same story each time: public Wi-Fi, though never the same place, and an Android phone. I was being taunted by someone who had gotten access to the same evidence file that laid on my desk. So I checked the access logs for the evidence archives. 2 months earlier, someone requested review of the Cameron York case materials. It got routine approval, internal clearance. It was signed off on without anyone paying much attention. Jenny Monroe, a police officer for 6 years, had been the person to check out the files. I gave her a call and we set up a time to meet the next day. The first thing I noticed when she walked over to my desk the following morning was an iPhone in her hand, not an Android. "I think you know why I want to talk to you," I began. She nodded. "Yeah, because I checked out Cameron York's case file." "Yes," I replied. "Why did you?" "I used to be a huge fan when I was a kid. I was honestly just curious," she admitted. I studied her face. "Look, I was a Yorker in high school and I was a senior when she went missing. It was the biggest story out there for me." I nodded, but added gently, "You know that goes against policy." She looked down. "I know. It was stupid, but I'm not the one posting the photos. You can search my phone. I didn't take anything out of the file, and I didn't take any photos of the file either. I just wanted to know what happened to her." "Did you take the file home?" I asked. "No," she said adamantly. "I read it over my lunch break and returned it, and that was it. I know it was a stupid thing to do, but I've got nothing to do with what's going on right now." I picked up her phone from my desk, saying, "I would imagine they'll get this back to you tomorrow, but it could take 2 days." Jenny nodded. "Is there any way you don't have to report this?" "Well, I can't keep this a secret, but if your phone is clean, you should be fine. Maybe a slap on the wrist." She walked away from my desk, my top suspect for the posts, but I could make no sense of what the motive could be. And within a day, the cyber guys had gotten back to me. Nothing on the phone, and she had had it for 6 months, which included her trip to the evidence archives. She appeared to be cleared. I reread witness statements. Most of them were ordinary: co-workers, neighbors, people who barely remembered seeing her. But one name appeared repeatedly in passing: Nathan Jones. He was a volunteer during initial search efforts. He had become close to the family, so much so that Diane let him move in with her for a month while he saved up for a deposit on a new apartment. The detective had scribbled a note about it, about stopping in to update Diane and being surprised to find him living there. They knew him from the various search parties that had gone on in the wake of her disappearance. I looked him up and was surprised to learn he'd become a police officer. I double-checked the logs for the evidence room, scanning for his name, but I never found it. The 7th photo appeared late that evening, a reflection in a shop window, blurred enough to be pretty meaningless, but clear enough to make the internet lose its mind. The comments filled with speculation. Some swore it was Cameron's reflection. Others claimed it was staged. I enlarged the image on my screen and sent it to the cyber guys to have them clear up the image as much as possible. I also went back to the newspaper articles that featured the ongoing search now that I knew what Nathan Jones looked like, and I found him in several of them. In 3 out of the 5 photos, he could be seen in the background speaking with a police officer. Something made me ill at ease seeing that. A man who had inserted himself into the case, in a way. I arranged to speak with him. Nathan was in his early 40s. He had never climbed the ranks, but I got the impression that he liked the hands-on work of a beat officer. "Yeah, I remember her," he said casually. "Everyone wanted to help back then." "You were involved pretty heavily." He shrugged. "It felt important." I showed him the latest photo. He stared at it. "Yeah, I've seen it online," he nodded. "Anything look familiar? The place, the reflection?" He shook his head. "No, nothing." I talked to him for a while, and when he left, I felt unsettled. He had avoided eye contact, given me short answers. He couldn't remember why he was speaking to the police officers in the newspaper photos, but suggested that probably he was asking questions about becoming a cop, as not long after that he had enrolled in the academy. That night, another post went live, and this time there was a caption: "You stopped looking." Whether it was a taunt or just disappointment, I had no way to know. And the account went silent again for 5 days after that. On the 6th day, another image appeared. It was of a bus window, with the building Cameron had worked in reflected in the window. I printed the image and pinned it to the board with all the others. I realized then that these posts were keeping the case alive. This was someone who couldn't accept that the world had moved on. I wrote my report carefully. The account activity appears intentional and informed by unreleased investigation materials. No evidence suggests direct contact from the missing person. Motive unknown. The next morning, I received a call from the cold case unit in New Orleans. The renewed interest in the case had caught a detective's attention. "We've had a Jane Doe for 12 years, Detective Nolan told me. "When I saw the news, I recognized her right away, and DNA and dental records confirm it. We have Cameron York buried here. She died from blunt force trauma." I sat back in my chair. Suddenly, Cameron was no longer missing. She had been found 4 days after she went missing, hundreds of miles away. "Do you have any suspects?" I asked. "One, Nathaniel Jacobs. We didn't have enough evidence, and he left the state." I asked for a photo of Nathaniel, but my gut already told me. I knew who he was. When I opened my email and saw the photo, it was confirmed. Nathaniel Jacobs was Nathan Jones. After hours of interrogation, Officer Nathan Jones cracked and admitted his longtime obsession with Cameron York. He had tracked her down, waited for her outside of her office, and snatched her from the street into his car. He had planned to travel to a cabin he knew of near his hometown of New Orleans, but at some point on the hours-long road trip, Cameron had snatched his wallet and seen his driver's license. After that, he couldn't let her go without facing charges for kidnapping, so he did the unthinkable. He drove her body down to New Orleans and left her on his dad's construction site, just a few miles from his childhood home, where she was found 4 days later. He had become a person of interest because he was one of only 4 people who had keys to the gates of the construction site, and it was the coroner's best guess that Cameron had been left there during the night, a day after she had died. Police had been unable to find any hard evidence against him. Nathan admitted he couldn't let his obsession go, and he had traveled back, embedding himself in the search and cozying up to the York family, finding a way to remain close to Cameron. So Nathan Jones was awaiting trial, and I had the job of telling Diane and Tamia York that the man they had let into their lives, and even home, was the very man who robbed them of a life with Cameron. Not an easy day at work. I had requested any security footage from the various cafes and coffee shops for the mornings on which the Facebook posts had occurred. One of these found its way to me only after several days had passed. As I reviewed it, a familiar face came into view. Jenny Monroe. It happened to be good quality video, and I could zoom in on what was in her hand, and it was not her iPhone, but a different one. I had found who had been posting on Cameron's social media. Officer Jenny Monroe had lied to my face. When I asked her why, she told me, "I couldn't let him get away with it." As a rookie, her first patrol was with Nathan Jones. She had thought it was strange how often he brought up the Cameron York disappearance. And when she learned the ways in which he had inserted himself into the case, sharing his thoughts with police, trying to become part of the investigation, she had been reminded of stories of other criminals who showed up to their own crime scene, acting helpful to the police like John Wayne Gacy had. And the way he spoke about Cameron reminded her of stalking behavior and obsessionality. She had zero evidence, but she had carried her suspicions for years. I didn't know exactly what trouble she might be in with the department, but it was clear that no matter what it was, for her it was a price well worth paying. She had found a way to bring new light to a very dark case, finally exposing the truth and allowing a grieving mother and sister to finally lay Cameron to rest. If you enjoyed this reading, please hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future stories. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. This has been Tales by Rachel, where we breathe life into every story.